Okay, good evening and welcome to everyone. Thank you all for coming to hear this talk tonight. It's a great pleasure and honor to be presenting to people really from all over the world. And those of you who want to watch the ball game, have no fear, the soccer game. My son already made sure I would be out of this room on time for him to be able to be part of that game as well. So we will certainly be done well before. Let me begin by introducing myself and telling you how I will be organizing this talk this afternoon or this evening, and then I will begin to share my screen. So I am Elisheva Baumgarten. I'm a medievalist. I study the Jews of Ashkenaz, broadly defined as Germany, Northern France, and England during the High Middle Ages. So roughly from about 1100, from the period right after the First Crusade until around 1400, give or take, including the devastating events of the 14th century that included many crises, both for Europe at large and for medieval Jews. And I, over the past 5 years, have had the pleasure of running a project called Beyond the Elite, Jewish Daily Life in Medieval Europe. What I would like to do with you tonight is tell you about the project, and I will be presenting the work of some of my project members as well, so I will be giving them credit as I go along, and introduce you to our latest production. And when I say production, I mean production in many, many ways. Over the past 2 years, members of my team, who you will get to know in a moment, have met with 7 Israeli artists. And we have created an exhibit that you can see physically at the Mount Scopus campus in Har Tzofim in Jerusalem at the Hebrew University. And for those of you who are worried you won't be here in the next month or two, it will be there for another year until September 22. So you have plenty of opportunities to come. It's open all the time. But we also created a virtual exhibit. And the virtual exhibit is available to everyone. And I will be touring with you in that virtual exhibit tonight. And any of you who wish to afterwards can go and visit it yourself and read more and see more. I also will be showing and sharing with you bits of the catalog we produced in honor of this exhibit. And that too is downloadable, completely free access, open access from our website. And Doron will put our website in the chat in a moment. So any of you who wish to can go there and download the catalog after this talk tonight and read parts of it and go over things. Because of the Zoom technology, which is amazing and wonderful and allows me to welcome people from Pennsylvania and England I've already seen, but they're probably from many other places in the world. I don't want to be switching back and forth between a PowerPoint that explains things and the technology of the exhibit because something will get stuck, I'm sure. So what I'm going to do is first introduce the research project and the academic questions behind the art exhibit we'll be seeing, and I'll be teaching you some sources. And those sources are kind of like a smoking gun. You can be sure that whatever source you meet in the first act, we'll be meeting again in the second act when we go to the exhibit, and something will be happening with that source. So I'll try to lead you through the academic questions and problems that we try to deal with in our research, and then take you to see what the Israeli artists did with some of this as they produced the art for us and introduce you to them and to their art. I hope it will work. This is the first time I'm trying this on Zoom in this way, so please bear with me, and I will share my screen now and start with the PowerPoint. Doron, I hope we're doing okay, and I am starting. Okay, so everyone can see the PowerPoint? I guess you can give me a thumbs up or something?
Perfectly, thank you.
Perfectly, okay, fantastic. So our project is, so this is what I just explained to you. What you can see here on this screen is you can see our catalog, which is downloadable, and you can see the space of our gallery right here. You can see the entrance to the gallery where my mouse is right now, and you can see the inside of the gallery that we'll be wandering around a little bit later tonight. So Beyond the Elite, the project that I'm talking about, is a project that is funded by the European Research Council. It's called Beyond the Elite, Jewish Daily Life in Medieval Europe. And what we do in this project is we study the daily lives of Jews from 1100 to 1350 or 1400 in what we could call today Northern Western Europe. Now, what is so special about these Jews, and why is daily life so important? And what do we mean by Beyond the Elite? So the Jews of medieval Ashkenaz are known to most of us through their commentaries on the Bible, on the Talmud, some of the greatest rabbis of all times, many of whom we still read. Every whole time we open the Talmud or every time we open the Bible, we use their commentaries to understand them. We know a lot about what the elite men in this society thought, did, and wrote. We also know a lot about how they thought medieval Jews were supposed to observe their religious lives. And these writings that we have that have survived from the medieval period tell us mainly about urban life in medieval Europe, a period in which Jews lived next door to their Christian neighbors. They were welcomed into these cities, and they were part of the urban landscape. Over the period from 1100 to 1350, the medieval Jews who lived in this area experienced many different crises. The First Crusade is one example, just before the period we begin studying, and during the 14th century, and certainly around 1350, all of us over the past year and a half have heard of the Black Death, a period in which all of Europe experienced tremendous catastrophes, but medieval Jews suffered all the more because of their Jewishness and often were expelled and persecuted. And in between these two dates that I've put up here on the screen, we can also find many other experiences of persecution. So what scholars have done to date is they focus mainly on the elites who wrote the intellectual, the different intellectual compositions that we're familiar with that have reached us, whether in Hebrew or in other languages. The same is true of medieval Christians. And they focus quite a bit on the persecution of Jews and on the theology that led to that persecution and that led to contacts between Jews and Christians. What we try to do in our project is we try to talk about these Jews and these Christians and talk about how they were both integrated and distinct. In other words, the Jews were parts of their surrounding. They were invited to settle in the different European cities they lived in. And they did not live in ghettos. They lived next door to their Christian neighbors. What did this mean for them? What did they absorb from their surroundings? How did they adapt ideas they learned from their neighbors? At the same time, a question that I think is very relevant to us today as well, how do they preserve their distinction? How did they stay members of their own faith, both internally, using different measures and methods they imposed on themselves, and externally, measures imposed on them by their surroundings? What we don't want to do is to create a lachrymose history. We don't want a history of sorrows, going from one persecution to the next persecution. The Jews during this period of about 250 years lived vibrant lives. They flourished. The intellectual products we have from this period are evidence of this flourishing. So how can we tell this story as a story in which the Jews were active agents and part of their surroundings? How can we make their histories connected to that of their neighbors? How can we see them as entangled in their neighbors, but also we can tell a distinct story of medieval Jews? I think one of the best ways I can show this to you is by showing you a map of one medieval city that's quite famous, the city of Speyer. The Jews of Speyer were invited to settle in Speyer in 1084. They came from the neighboring communities, from the city of Mainz after there was fire there. And when they came to live in Speyer, at first they were given by the bishop of the city, who was basically the ruler of the city. It was a city ruled by the bishop at the time. They were given a separate place to live. They were told they would live in a separate quarter. Here you can see up here on this map, Jewish settlement of 1084. You can also notice the question mark, because what we know about the Jews of medieval Speyer, that they settled in the center of town, right next to the beautiful Speyer of Cathedral. And any of you who've ever visited the city might remember this gorgeous cathedral on the banks of the Rhine River that passes by, to which many merchants could bring their merchandise. So the Jews were really in the center of town. This is not just true of medieval Speyer, but it's true of any medieval city that we look at the map of during the High Middle Ages. The Jews are always at the center of activities. They are active merchants, not just moneylenders, but they trade in many different goods, and they are in touch with many members of the cities they live in. So part of what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, what can we learn from these daily interactions, not just from moments of crisis? What can we learn about how Jews preserved their identities, created their identities, developed ideas, developed traditions, many of them in Hagim, many of the customs we have today that we talk about as Ashkenazic customs are found in the sources from this period. So what can we learn from these daily interactions understanding that what we repeat in our daily lives is often no less important to who we are than what we do in extreme moments. So what we try to do in our research group is look at everyday life, and we have divided the features of everyday life into four. These are four categories that actually intersect all the time. So we don't look at any category separately, we look at them all intersected. And we try to look at rituals, daily rituals, yearly rituals, life cycle rituals, birth, marriage, death. We try to look at the spaces in which Jews functioned, not just the synagogue, which is a very obvious one you can see here on my PowerPoint, but also the marketplace where they interacted with Christians, the home, asking what were the characteristics of a Jewish home, outside the city, other spaces in the city. One of the things we've tried to do over the 5 years of our work is look at how Jews used objects. Objects often bought from their Christian neighbors, often shared with their Christian neighbors. But did these objects take on new meanings in Jewish homes? And our main goal, and I would say to some extent, this is a desideratum that we haven't quite reached yet, is to understand who were the people in the Jewish community. Because like I said, most of the writings we have, whether in Hebrew, in Latin, in French, in German, in Yiddish, in whatever language it's reached us, most of these writings were written by the elite. But the elite made up 5, 10, if I want to be very, very generous, 15% of the medieval Jews. So who were the other people in the community? One of the things I've done in a lot of my work to date is look at women and children, but there were also many men who were not part of the elite. And that is why we call this project Beyond the Elite. We want to get beyond the elite. We're not quite sure how far beyond that elite we can get. So before I explain how we do this, I want to introduce you to the team, because one of the great joys of running this project is that I don't work alone. Most humanities scholars work alone in their offices. One of the things a project like this allows is working as a group, and we have had a number of postdocs, doctoral students, and MA students. I won't discuss them all at length. I'm just going to run through them here. But you can see here what a large range of topics we have. We have people who work on water and architectural history, on the history of work and of craftspeople. As a scholar who works on fatherhood and family life. We have Dr. Ido Noy, who I'm going to single out right now. I'll talk about some of the others later, who was the curator of this exhibit. Dr. Ido Noy was LL, he's a silversmith. Then he did a PhD in medieval art history, working on wedding jewelry from the Middle Ages. You'll see how he knew about that in just a few moments. And when I wrote this exhibit, when I came up with the idea of this exhibit, I asked him to join me. So he curated the exhibit we'll be seeing in about 20 or 25 minutes. I have doctoral students, some who work on medieval France, some who work on medieval Germany, on economics subjects. I have one student who compares between Ashkenaz and Sfarad. We have students who come from all over the world, from Cambridge, from Germany, from the United States. And you can see here some of the titles they're working on. Some of them you can see in more than one category because they wrote their MA with me and then their PhD with me, or their PhD with me, and then they did their postdoctoral work with me as well. And we also have MA members of the team. And you can see how each of these topics uses the four categories I spoke about: ritual, spaces, objects, and people, and tries to use them in order to find out more about daily life. There's no time or reason to go into all these details here because we'll be meeting these people again in a moment. So now I want to move on to the second point. How do we do all this? The main way we try to do all this is working with as many sources as we possibly can. What you can see here on the slide is a list of the sources I thought when I started off with this project we would be using. The size of the words on the slide doesn't say anything about how important or unimportant the source is. But by having a group of people working together, each of us can specialize in different types of sources and also help each other work on other sources. Is try to make sure that we use more than one source in any project we take on in order to give us as many perspectives as possible and allow us to college textbook of sources to help college students all over the world, it's in English, get to know medieval Jews better through the sources that describe their life. So what did we do when we wanted to make an exhibit? And now I'm moving on to give you an introduction to the exhibit before we go to the virtual gallery. What did we do? We sat and we talked, and we decided that our greatest strength was sources. And Dr. Noy, who was our curator, instructed each member of the team Jewish life. The result of this was 16 articles. Those articles starts with a source translated into English, but it can be found in the catalog in the original language as well, Hebrew, German, Latin, French, whatever it may be. And then that scholar embarked on their explanation of how this describes medieval daily life. So I'll give you a first example. What you can see here is you can see what the beginning of an article looks like. We have great graphic designers. For each article, they designed a kind of gate to go into the medieval city through and to enter the life of medieval Jews. And this source, for example, which I won't read just now, describes an event that happens inside a house when there's a wedding in town. Jews come from outside of the city to visit and to participate in the wedding. And one of the guests lends her host's daughter her earrings, and those earrings are stolen. And the story of what happens when the earrings are stolen, who's in the house, who is blamed, how they try to figure out what to do and who compensates who, helps Eyal Levinson, who wrote this article, talk about family relations and what went on within Jewish homes. So here we have a ritual, a wedding, a space inside the Jewish home and outside the home when they went to the wedding, an object, the earrings that were stolen. And we also have, of course, the people who are involved, guests from out of town, local Jews, etc. So this is how our catalog works. And what I want to do is introduce you to a few sources that will be important later when we go to see the artwork. So here's our first source. I will read it because it's a little bit small. I wanted to bring the Hebrew and the English. And this source was contributed by Dr. Tzafir Barzilai. About Reuben and Simon, who happened to be in one city. Reuben had a ship loaded with salted fish, which he planned to sail to another city in order to sell the fish. And he came across Shimon, who wished to load another ship with fish and also sail to the same city. Reuben and Shimon will now make a deal, how they'll do their business together. What do we have here? We have evidence of one of the most basic features of medieval Jewish life, using the rivers as highways. The rivers were the highways of the Middle Ages. And we can see how Jews in different cities do business with each other and profit from each other in order using the rivers that were at their disposal and the Jews who were at any place along their route. So here is a first source. Here is a second source, an object, or a source filled with objects. What you can see here are the different pieces of jewelry found in a schatz, in a treasure. When medieval Jews were persecuted, or when there was a moment of danger, or perhaps even just they were scared of robbery, they often hid their belongings. They hid their belongings in what have become known as treasures. These were found hundreds of years later. I'm sure there were many treasures that were found much closer to date of whatever the event was, and we know nothing of them. But during the 19th and 20th century, a number of these treasures have been found. What you can see here is one of these treasures, and you can see all the jewelry the Jews hid in this treasure. I want to single out two different items. One item you can see over here is a belt. This is part of a belt. That was a belt usually used at weddings that was often made by laboring Christians. It often had German or Latin words on it that had to do with love. And it was a kind of gift that was usually given by the chatan, by the bridegroom, to his future wife, to the bride, during the period of setting up the match. The second thing you can see here is what we know as the Mazal Tov ring. You can see it over here. It's over here in the slide. I singled it out over here on the side. This was a ring we find in a number of different Jewish communities. It says on it Mazal Tov. You'll see it up close in a little bit. And it was used as part of the ceremony. So here we have an example of the kind of objects, and we can see the wealth. We can see how comfortable some of these Jews were in their local homes and how they felt there. What did the spaces medieval Jews live in look like? I want to bring two examples in what follows. Here you can see, looking from above, down below, a medieval mikveh. This is the mikveh from Friedberg, quite close to Frankfurt. It was built in 1260, and you can see that it is beautiful and 25 meters deep. You can also see how the sunlight or the moonlight comes in through a hole in the ceiling, and you can see it reflected down there in the water. One of the things that Dr. Netta Bodner, a member of our team, has taught us is the extent to which these mikvaot, that are often called monumental mikvaot, were built similarly to local churches. Not only were they built similarly to local churches, they were also built at the same time. Many of these churches or cathedrals were constructed and by the same masons and builders. And other people in Germany have been doing work on this over the past years as well. Just to give you an example of the gorgeous architecture, have a look at this. These are pictures from Speyer, where you can see the mikveh as well. You can see Netta, who studies them, standing here in this picture down below. And you can see that the architectural features here can remind you very much of medieval, Gothic, and Romanesque architecture for those who are familiar with it. So here we have one example of a space in the city, a space that is Jewish, but very similar to Christian space, although this space is underground, whereas a Christian church would be above ground. What else do we have? One of the main things Jews needed in order to live in an urban space was water. If you look at this Haggadah from 1470, you can see a fountain. The fountain over here was an important feature of almost every medieval city where they were very much developing urban water systems. And here you can see a 13th century fountain that survived, and you can see till this day. Looking at this fountain, we can see that this picture here in this Haggadah was probably very exact or very much very similar to what these Jews saw around them when they made this picture of the Haggadah. And of course, this was a place for people to meet, exchange knowledge, exchange information, talk, and sometimes also for tensions to arise. So if we've made ourselves out from the Jewish spaces like the mikveh to the public square, we also have the marketplace. Medieval Jews were busy in the local marketplace, and they were also considered members of the cities in which they live. Nurit Dermer, who's a member of our group and works on medieval Paris, has done a lot of work on the tax list from 1292. The tax list from 1292 begin with the words, "These are the Jews of the city of Paris." What is going on here? In 1292, the king sent out assessors to every neighborhood in Paris to go street by street, house by house, and anyone who made enough money had to pay tax. We have a detailed description of the streets of Paris going house by house. We know who lived in these houses, and we know what their professions were in many of the cases. Now, the Jews lived amongst their neighbors. They didn't live in a separate Jewish neighborhood, although they were concentrated on a number of streets. But they aren't listed when those tax assessors are surveying those streets. They're listed at the end of the list. So after going through all the neighborhoods of the city of Paris, the assessors write, "Ce sont les Juifs de la ville de Paris." These are the Jews of the city of Paris. And then they list those Jews according to their streets. You can see over here that they list the street that they're in red. You can see it over here. I'll show you this in a moment in a bigger form. And then they list the Jews who live on those streets. So for example, you can see here, Haguin from London, they take 10 livres from him. Leon from Tillières, the son-in-law of David, 58 sous. Samuel, the son-in-law of the aforementioned Haguin, 58 sous. The woman Miriam, 16 sous. The wife of Moses, Sachar, and his son Jacob, 36 sous. I'm not going to read through the entire list now. I just put a small part of it up here. There are over 100 people listed on this list, but I want you to see that we meet the people. We meet the Jews of Paris. We don't meet all of them. We only meet those of them who could afford to pay taxes. But we start meeting the people that I'm so interested in finding going beyond the elite. And we find out their professions in some cases, moneylenders, flour miller, and other such things. You can see here what this tax list looked like. When you look over here, here you can see what I read before, "Ce sont les Juifs de la ville de Paris." So we can see that the Jews are part of the city. They're assessed for taxes just like any other member. This is not a special Jewish tax, but at the same time, they're separate. They're at the end of the list. One of the things Nurit Dermer is checking in her PhD and studying is what happened over the course of the 14th century when these Jews are expelled and readmitted, expelled and readmitted. How are they part of the fabric of the city they live in? What you see here is a recent publication published by my colleague, Rela Kushelevsky, in which we have close to 70 tales that were written by a Jew who lived in Champagne in the 13th century. These tales are often known as Sefer HaMa'asim because each tale starts with the word Ma'aseh. One of the members of our group chose one of these tales for his article, or for one of his two articles here, Dr. Andreas Leonard's. And he took a story in which we hear about a very pious man who never took an oath his entire life. Before his death, he summoned his son in the presence of the elders of the city and said to him, "My son, beware never to take an oath, even if it is the truth, and I will give you everything I own, since I earned all my wealth because I guarded my tongue from ever swearing." And the son answered, "I will uphold your command to never swear, even if it is the truth." Now, this is a very strange story, because if you notice in this story, we have someone swearing, never taking to take an oath. So we have someone taking an oath to never take an oath. So we almost have a very amusing contradiction of terms going on here. But it's also a very strange story because Jews took oaths all the time. Jews took oaths within Jewish courts, men and women. Jews also took oaths in Christian courts. And when they went to Christian courts, they had to swear on the Bible. And you can see this here in this manuscript that I put on the side. You can see how this man is taking an oath on a Torah scroll. And if you look over here, you can also see one of the oaths that were written for Jews. This is called a Judenheid, a Jewish oath that was taken by Jews in different places, written in Latin. This is from the city of Erfurt. And you can see the text of it. I won't read it right now, but you can see that this is kind of a very generic text that builds on the Bible, which is a shared source for Jews and Christians. They both believe in the Bible. So Jews took oaths, and they took oaths often and regularly. And that's why this story is really a very strange and interesting story. Now, not only did Jews take oaths, but when Jews took an oath or when Jews signed a document, they often sealed it. Here you can see the seal that was used by the powers in the city of Erfurt to seal the Jewish oath document. And if you look over here, you can see a Jewish seal. Andreas Leonard also studied all the Jewish seals we have, all the impressions. And if you look carefully at the seal, you can see the name Moshe. You see it over here, Moshe ben Yosef Halevi. If you're following my mouse, I hope you can see that, starting over here. And in the middle, you can see something very curious. You can see 3 Jewish hats, triangular hats that we see in many medieval illuminations of Jews. These hats are often seen by modern art historians as signs of, as embarrassing signs, as signs that were supposed to shame the Jews. But you can see here that a Jew, a very respectable Jew who had a seal for his own documents, used these hats on his sign. So that's something very interesting. So we've been to the religious places of the Jews. I used the mikveh as my example. We've been to the city square, to the fountain. We've been in the marketplace and we've seen how Jews do business a little bit, both the taxes, and we've also seen now the seals that people used. And here we can just see one more example studied by my student Avia Doron, who works a lot in the marketplace. And she works a lot on how Jews and Christians trusted each other, what risks they were willing to take as part of business. And you can see this in the source that she uses here in our catalog. Reuben claimed against Simon, "I have lent you a horse, and at the time I lent it to you, I informed you that it seemed to me that the Gentiles who had pawned the horse to me had stolen it. Therefore, be careful with it, that it won't be forced out of your hands." And Simon replied, "You did not inform me of anything, and your horse is stolen, and he who owns the horse came and took it." So we can hear how complicated business can be. Jews and Jews do business with each other. Jews and Christians do business with each other. Sometimes Jews and Christians do shady business with each other. Here, one Jew gave Christian money for a horse. A horse was a very interesting kind of pawn because you had to feed it and take care of it. And as you can see here in this picture, which also appears in our catalog in the article Avia wrote, and this is part of her work, in the law codes, we can see how horses are often used as examples to explain how the laws work, so we can understand that what appears in this Hebrew responsa, written by a 13th century rabbi, is actually very characteristic of some of the deals that were going on at the time. So we have a marketplace in which Jews, Christians, and Jews and Christians, Jews and Jews, Christians and Christians all do business together. They exchange objects, they make deals, they go back on those deals, they go to court, they swear, they take oaths, they seal those deals. We have a lot of interaction going on an everyday basis. What happens in a time of crisis? What happens in a time of calm? How do these patterns change? How do local Jews do business with Jews from outside of the city or with Christians from outside of the city? There are a lot of questions to be asked here, and Avia is asking many of them in her dissertation. But it's not enough just to think about the local authorities. Hannah Teddy Schachter, a member of our team, thinks a lot about how Jews interacted with royalty. What you can see here in this picture from 13th century France, this is part of her article, is you can see King Louis of France. You can see Queen Blanche of Castile, his mother, and you can see the Jews behind them. Here you can see those triangle hats I was talking about for those of you who aren't familiar with them. And Teddy explores the relationships between the queen and the Jews, focusing not on the king, who's always been this focus, but how did the queen interact with Jews? And she discovers the relationships between them. Now, looking at a queen like this, we're not just looking at Queen Blanche, but those of you who are familiar with the Bible might recognize that this is actually a medieval depiction of the book of Esther. So we can see here how the Bible works its way into things and how theology plays a role. And of course, when we look at queens and crowns, we can't but think of the medieval Christian depiction of Judaism and Christianity, the ecclesia and the synagoga. I brought you here a picture from Notre Dame Cathedral, not so far from where Louis and Blanche would have been walking around Paris. And you can see here, you can see the ecclesia, who is standing tall and proud, and the Jew whose eyes are blinded. And here on the bottom, you can see that her crown is on the floor. For those of you whose screen is not covering that, I hope you can see that. So her crown is on the floor because she has been decrowned. She is no longer reigning the Jew. The Jewish faith has lost its power. This is a theological statement made by Christians in the Middle Ages about Judaism and Christianity. So we can see how everyday life mixes in with theology and how these things are all working together. I have three more short sources to show you before I move on to the art. So one of my students, Amit Shafran, works on a very, very small book. This book is probably about as small as it looks here on the screen. So it's really a miniature book, a very, very small book, like a pocket book, a small siddur that was written by a French man named Yitzchak ben Yitzchak during the 13th century. He wrote down the daily prayers, but in between them, he wrote all kinds of medical and magical formulas. How to cure a child who had a fever. How to know if you are marrying the right woman. And what you see here is a formula to know whether a certain man will marry a certain woman and what their fate will be if they marry. Calculate his name along with hers. So take Sarah and Abraham, do the gematria, add up the numerical value of the letters of their names, and then you have a formula. -9, -9, -9, -9, until you get to a number under 10. And he explains what the fate of the couple will be based on this. We'll see this again in a few moments, so don't worry if you didn't quite catch what's going on here. Another member of our team, Albert Cohn, has done a lot of work on what songs Jews sang. Jews didn't live in silence, they sang songs. And his work asks, what songs did they sing on Shabbat? And he finds that they sang two songs that actually don't originate in medieval Ashkenaz. They originate in medieval Spain. Many of you who sing Zmirot might be familiar with those songs today. One of them is Dror Yikra, and the other is Ki Shmira Shabbat. You can see them here in this medieval Ashkenazic manuscript. But we were also interested in what did Jews hear? They heard horses trotting through the city. They heard people making noise by fountains. What did Jews hear? And if you look at this manuscript, you can see that on the side we have instructions. It's here in this red square, and I enlarged it here for you. It says, Benigun, to the tune of Tu s'il qui sont enamoral. This is a well-known medieval French tune. We know what it sounded like. And a current group of musicians who play medieval music have actually reenacted Dror Yikra according to this tune. So we actually know what the songs the Jews sang sounded like at that time. And my final for this short tour of sources is tombstones. Tombstones contain a tremendous amount of knowledge. They tell us who the people were. They contain the names of the people in the community who died. So we can know the names of so many different Jews in the community. And based on the patterns of these names, we can learn about their identity. And my student Miri Fenton, has been very interested in how are you part of a community? What makes you part of a community? And she has thought, when you die, you're leaving that community in many ways. So how does death tell us about belonging to the Jewish community? Now, this is very important because if you had taken any medieval Jew or any medieval Christian and stopped them on the street, they may have disagreed about a lot of things, but there's one thing they would have agreed on, that Jews go to Jewish heaven and Christians go to Christian heaven. And there are no Jews in the Christian heaven because Jews believe that Christians go to hell. And there are no Christians in the Jewish heaven because Christians believe that Jews go to hell. So that moment of leaving the community, that ritual, really can tell us a lot about identity, about being part of a specific world, and also about being distinct. So Miri has looked at death. So I've given you quite a tour of what we've done together. For those of you who know some of us, one of the things we've done is travel to Germany together. And we're planning, if all is well, to travel to France next year in the spring and to see the spaces where the people we study live. But in the project that I want to share with you now, what we did was not try to see the actual spaces, not try to see the actual objects, but we tried to see what happened when we introduced our work to 7 Israeli artists. So now I'm going to move to the second part of my talk. What we did was we wrote our articles for this catalog with gorgeous artwork. And those of you who've already gone to our website and downloaded it, you can see how beautiful the catalog is. And after this was all done, and each of us had created our own piece, and I only spoke about some of the pieces tonight, we met with 7 Israeli artists. Dr. Idon Noy, our curator, chose these artists. Some of them are very young artists. One of them actually said to me, this is the first exhibit I've ever participated in when we opened the exhibit about a month ago. And some of them are more well-known and much more experienced artists, and I assume that some of you will know their names. And we met with them and discussed these sources, and they asked us tons of questions about medieval Jewish life. And then they created what they created. So now comes the risky part. I'm going to try to go into our virtual exhibit and hope that everything works. And hopefully we will be able to tour it together. Just give me 1 second. And I will be able to share the screen with you. Okay, can everyone see the exhibit now? Can everyone see the exhibit? Doron, are we okay?
We're fine, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So we are standing now at the entrance to our gallery. Just 1 second. In order to just give you an idea of what we have here, this is the entrance to the gallery. You can see a map here on which we marked the places that we mentioned in the exhibit. And what we did is we sat down with all our sources and we thought, what could be the organizing categories for all these sources, all these interactions, all these intersections we found in our sources. And we decided on 3 categories: in and out, between, and beyond. Jews and Christians went in and out of each other's lives. Sometimes Jews and Christians were between the Jewish world and the Christian world, and there were matters that were beyond. For example, like when I talked about death before. So we took an actual picture from a medieval manuscript, and we used that as our entrance to our kind of medieval city that we created. This is at the Mount Scopus campus. Those of you who are familiar with it, it's right next to the cafeteria Vitamin, next to Gush Shmone in the Faculty of Humanities. And going through this medieval gate, which is part of a page in a medieval Hebrew manuscript about a sha'ar from the prayers of the high holidays, we enter into our space. So what we did is we created this wall, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. From my perspective, this is one of the most amazing and beautiful things that happened at this exhibit. And then on the opposite wall of the gallery, which you'll see in just a moment over here, we created other exhibits that artists made along the way. So basically what you have here is you have a wall of all the sources in our catalog written up by an artist. Ido employed a calligrapher, or he found for us unemployed. We found him, collaborated with a calligrapher. His name is Kalman Gavriel Delmour. You can find him online. He works in the old city of Jerusalem. And Kalman believes that what he does best is take words, usually holy words, that people love and create art from them. So for example, if you were to come to Kalman and say to him, my favorite pasuk is Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the first verse of Genesis, and tell him why you love that pasuk, Kalman would then draw that pasuk for you using the ideas that you love. So what he did was he took every single one of our sources and he used that source to create art. And this whole wall is the art he created. So if you remember before, I spoke about the men who did business on the rivers. Here you can see the river going along the entire exhibit, the entire wall, and you can see the boat that was a part of that story. If you remember the story that took place in the house where the earrings were stolen, this is how he drew that house where the earrings were stolen. And he used the words of that responsa to try to make sense of it. If you remember the mikveh we talked about, this is how he drew the mikveh and the depth of that mikveh. And as we walk through the gallery and we look at it, we can see what there is on the other side. So on the in and out side, we can see two different things. I'm going to try to show you this from the outside. Just let me try to turn around and see if I can make this work. I practiced before, but I knew that I might not do it so successfully. So just give me one moment here. I got it. So if you look over here from the outside, you can see the church and you can see the mikveh created by the same artist. And you can see their size. You can see that they are very similar in their features, but you can also see that where the church ends, the mikveh starts, because the mikveh is underground. So that's one example of how we can see the art on one wall created by Kalman Gavriel Delmour, reproduced by architects who help us make this model. If we go back to the wall of the sources, we can also see a well. A well, we saw the well and we know how important the well was for the functioning of the city every day. It was a waterway. And we approached Inbal Ochayon, who is a video artist, and she created for us this fountain. This fountain over here, she called Living Waters. She took all the information she got from all the different members of the group to try to understand what happened by a fountain. And I'm just going to show you a moment of it. I hope this works. She created video art for us. Doron, can you still see my screen?
Yes, and hear it too.
Okay, fantastic. So you can see here the video. I'm going to go back to the exhibit now so we can see it again, but I just want to give you a taste. As you walk around the exhibit, you can hear the water bubbling, and you saw, if you noticed the very beginning, you saw the bucket coming in, so you could see a horse going by, you can see leaves coming in, you can see children going by. One of the nicest things that happened to us at the exhibit was when we started creating the exhibit, we created this video art and we put it up, and there is a kindergarten on Mount Scopus, and every day, the children from the kindergarten come to that fountain and they sit by the fountain for 2 or 3 minutes. And if you sit there with them, they say, oh, soon the horse is coming. Oh, soon a person is coming to draw water. So you can see how they understand the workings of a medieval city just by sitting by this. I'm going back to our, I'm going back to our virtual exhibit so I can share it with you. And we can continue exploring. So here we go. So now we're back. So we can see how the fountain takes its place here. Now, the next part of the wall over here is many of the sources that have to do with economy. We can see here a source about a deal between two people that went wrong. I didn't talk about this, but you can see it here. You can see the two people who were fighting about a horse and making a deal with each other. And Kalman drew them really kind of clasping hands and making that deal. In the middle, you can see something that looks like the oath we saw with seals on the bottom. And over here, you can see what Kalman did with that tax list we saw just a few moments ago. So this is what Kalman did. But what did other artists do? What we did is we approached Dov Abramson, who's a well-known artist here in Jerusalem. Many of you might know his work. And we asked Dov to create for us something that expressed the idea of this kind of shared interaction between people. And Dov created these cards that you can see over here. I'm going to try to turn it around so we can see it properly. And you can see the beautiful exhibit that Dov created. So what he did is Tali Megiddish, who works in the studio, I should give her the credit. She created these cards, which are hanging from the ceiling. There are a number of them. You can see that it's a large part of the exhibit over here. And each card like this has two sides. On one side, you can see a person. On the other side, you can see a garment. You can see Jews. You can see Christians. You can see people who come from out of town, peasants. You can see people who live in the city. You can see monks and nuns. And the idea was really to create an exhibit here, an explanation here. And you can see, I just pressed on the button that will explain it, Geschäft, by Tali Megiddish from the Dov Abramson studio. And what he tries to do here is create the idea of all these people going between. This is not the in and out, this is the between within the city. Now, I did skip over one of the artist's works before, so I'm going to go back there for a moment. And as I do it, you can see other parts. If you look here, you can see the work created by Adi Weitzman. Adi Weitzman was fascinated by the idea that Jews hid their belongings in treasures, in hiding places. And what you can see here in this wall she created and the light that's emanating from the bottom is how she tried to express this idea of treasures that could be found. She didn't show jewelry or anything like that. The treasures she was thinking of are historical treasures, how much historical knowledge, how much treasure there is in what is going on here within the gallery and the sources we were teaching her. And if we continue and we go a little bit closer to the wall over here, you can see the exhibit prepared by Rafael Lidor Yashar, a very, very recent graduate of Bitzalel. Rafael, as you can see here, made this on 3D printing. He's a young man, and he took all the seals that we know of from medieval Jews, and he tried to create generic Jewish seals. So if we go closer, oh, I didn't mean to go to the wall out there, I'm sorry. That's one of the dangers of being inside the virtual exhibit. If we go closer to the exhibits, and you can see this, for example, this seal over here says Ploni ben Ploni. So just someone, son of someone. And in the center here, you can see those three Jewish hats that we saw in the original seal from the medieval period. Over here, we see a crescent and a star. And this is the chotam of a community. This is the seal of a community. And here created another generic seal. So the idea was really to express these generic seals that Jews used. And the Jewish hat you can see over here, you can see here on the wall in Kalman's beautiful art. On the floor here, you can see the crown. I hope this reminds you of the crown of the synagogue, the Jewish queen who lost her crown according to medieval theology. But this also is the crown that was worn by the actual queen. In the case of 13th century Paris, Blanche of Castile. So you can see Blanche here on the wall. And Hannah Teddy-Schachter's work in our catalog explains how Blanche was seen as sometimes an enemy of a Jew, but sometimes also a protectress of a Jew. So we can see the crown here on the floor, and that's why we placed it on the floor to remind us of the theological tensions between Jews and Christians throughout this period as well. We have 4 more exhibits to see before I'll open up for questions and I'll finish presenting. So if you remember our very, very small Siddur that had all kinds of magical formula inside of it, and you can remember determining who the right partner would be. Kalman Delmore took this and he drew something like an arrow of Cupid. You can see here it says Mazal, and he shot that arrow. And you find out what your luck will be with your spouse based on how that arrow is shot. But that was just one way that we actually looked at this. I'm going to try to show you the picture from close up. Here you can see it. This is artwork done by Arik Weiss. For those of you who read the Hebrew Haaretz, just 2 weeks ago, there was an interview with him in Galeria about his work and about how he does his art. He uses a lot of Kabbalah in the art he does. He met with Amit, the student who works on this formula, and he said, what if, instead of taking two actual names, we took the Hebrew words, Shmo and Shema, his name and her name. So that's what you see here, Shmo and Shema. And he tried to use the formula. I don't think you can see it close enough. I can't get here. Maybe here I can get closer to it. He tried to use the formula that was suggested by Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yitzchak and calculate what would happen. Luckily for Arik Weiss, when he calculated Shmo and Shema, he came to the result 5. According to Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yitzchak's magical formula with Gematria, if a couple's fate is 5, they are connected to Tzedek, to Jupiter, and you can see the word Tzedek over here. And what will be their fate? Tov v'ra yeh benhem. They will have a good and a bad marriage. That's like probably most marriages. So he decided this was very representative of medieval people as well, and that is what he did here in his artwork. Moving on, if you remember those rings we saw, the Mazal Tov rings, Raphael Lidor Yashar also created 2 Mazal Tov rings for us. If you look at them, and if you saw the picture I showed you before, and here you can see Kalman's artwork on the wall that relates to it, where it says Mazal Tov, this is part of a ketubah. These Mazal Tov rings that actually say Mazal and Tov on the top, these Mazal Tov rings are very, very large. And one of the things Dr. Idon Noy asked in his own research is, why do we have such large rings? And based on his research, he thinks these rings were not used for an actual finger. Rather, these rings were used to hold the ketubah. And we have many examples also in medieval German love stories of lovers giving their beloved a scroll in a ring, and very much like this. And probably every Jewish community had a Mazal Tov ring that belonged to the community. In every wedding ceremony that took place in the community, they used this Mazal Tov ring. I want us to have a look at this wall over here now. Oh no, we're going out into the faculty. Those of you who missed Jerusalem, you can see the campus as I make my way back to the gallery. And I'm trying to get to this wall over here. Let me see if I can do this in a better way. No, I'm not managing to get to the wall. Just give me 1 second here. I'm almost there. Okay, so Dror Yikra, remember I'm not managing to get there. Just give me 1 more second. We'll try this again. Here, you can see it beautifully. So Dror Yikra is one of the piyutim, one of the mirot we saw the people saying on Shabbat. You could see it up here. But what interested us in this exhibit was really the fact that it said what tune you sang this to. And we saw that before, the tune of Tui Kisenot Memoral. And we also got permission from the French music group that sings this song to have the sound of Dror Yikra be heard in the gallery every 20 minutes. I'm not going to do that now, but if you press on this link later, you can all go to the virtual website and play around with it later. You can hear that song being sung. Finally, our last exhibit, and then one more thing I'd like to show you, is this exhibit over here. We talked a little bit about the tombstones. You can see how Kalman drew them over here on the wall. Andy Arnowitz, a very well-known Jerusalem artist. She's done some wonderful art in many different capacities that have to do with Jewish texts, especially Jewish feminist art. She met with Miri Fenton, our doctoral member, and she heard all about how people were buried. And what she did is she took these boxes, and in them she put different objects that were used as part of the burial. So she really tried to reenact this moment of going beyond. We're in the last part of the gallery, the beyond part of the gallery, going to another world, and that's what you can see here at the very, very end. Now, finally, I think another word should be said about the soundscape of the gallery. Let me just get to where I want to go, and hopefully I can let you hear it. One last thing that we did as part of the gallery is we have also sound in the gallery that you can hear every hour and every half hour on the hour. These are the sounds of the medieval city. And I am going to end this part of the presentation with the sounds. And then after we hear those sounds, I will say 2 or 3 more words before I open up for questions. So let me press this link. I'm sorry. Let me press the right link. And hopefully Oh, I just lost it. I'm sorry about that. Let me press this link over here. If it doesn't work, I will just give up on it, but I'm going to try one more time. I keep missing it, so maybe we don't want to hear these sounds right now.
I know you've
So I'm
mentioned
going
this a few
to,
times. You've mentioned this a few times, but people are still asking where the exhibit is and how long is it going to be open to the public?
okay, so I will talk about that now, and I'm going to stop my sharing, and I'm going to say this again. I think my screen is about to get stuck, Doron, like it did before. Oh, we're okay. Okay. So where is this exhibit and how can you see it? If you are in Jerusalem, you are welcome to come to the Hebrew University campus. It is at the entrance to the humanities faculty. It will be there till September 2022. So you have another 13 months or 14 months to come and see it, maybe even a little bit longer. If you're impatient and you don't want to wait till you come to Jerusalem, you can go into the website I've been showing you. And Doron put in the chat at the very beginning, right? Doron, you put it in the chat at the very beginning, the link to our website. If you go to that link, you can see the catalog and download it. You can read all of the articles. You can go to the virtual exhibit. You can go on a guided tour of the virtual exhibit. You can go on a tour in which you walk around the virtual exhibit yourself. You can find out about all the students. You can find out about all the artists. I tried to give credit to each of them as I went through the exhibit right now. You can find out more and give them more credit. And I think the last thing I want to say before I open up for questions is that one of the most fascinating things that happened was that talking to these artists allowed us to understand our sources in new ways. It allowed us to think about connections between medieval life and our lives today in new ways. Part of what I presented to you tonight already reflects some of these understandings. So by partnering with the artists, we wanted to make our research relevant to people today. We too live in mixed environments. We don't live only with Jews. We don't live only with people who are like us. What do we take from our surroundings? How do we interact with our surroundings? How do we create risk and trust? How are we separate and part of it? We're very used to thinking of ourselves as having hybrid identities that have many parts, that we're multifaceted. We're very proud of ourselves as modern people for doing all of these things. But what I want to put forward to you, and that's what this project is really all about, is that medieval people, medieval Jews, medieval Christians, were no less complicated, were no less complex than we are ourselves. They too had many different identities and many different places where they interacted. That doesn't mean that in the end, they were not Jews and Christians, they were not a Jewish minority living among Christians, they were not persecuted, but life had many complex moments. And we're trying to tease out that complexity and not just take the words of the elite as what was, but really try to see the world as a more multi-layered and more interesting, I think, but also more identifiable past. That's what we're trying to do as the group. The last thing I want to say before I open up for questions is, if you notice, nothing in this exhibit is very expensive. The walls are stickers. I have the original klafim, the original parchment pieces that Kalman made those beautiful pictures on, but they're stickers. We scanned them. The 3D objects are all made out of plastic. They're printed in 3D printers. We don't have a single original. What does this mean? Besides the fact that it saved us huge headaches of insurance at the university, but that doesn't interest you so much. That interested me when I was preparing this exhibit. It also means that this exhibit is portable. It can go anywhere in the world. It can be put up in any space. It can be readjusted. It can be reenacted. And I'm just going to end by saying that if any of you are in Germany in the fall of 2022, you'll be able to see it already in Germany, in other places. And we're very, very eager to share what we've created. Of course, Dr. Noy, and I want to end by thanking him because it was his idea. He had the vision. He understood what this gallery would look like. I went along with him. I asked him to create an exhibit, but it was his vision to take the sources, to go to these artists, to work with these artists in this way, and to set it up in this way. He had the vision of how to do this, and he will go travel with the exhibit to wherever it goes and help set it up there. And we already have a number of institutions that are talking to us about borrowing the exhibit and displaying it all over the world. And I'm sure that when it's displayed in different places, people in those places will attach new meanings to the exhibit. For example, in Erfurt, hopefully it will be displayed, if all is well, in the space of the medieval synagogue. And displayed in the space of the medieval synagogue, of course, it will take on new meaning, seeing all these different objects there. So I think it's exactly 8 o'clock here in Jerusalem. I've spoken exactly my 1 hour that I was given. And Doron, I'm very, very happy to answer questions now.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Baumgarten. I just want to recap the fact that it's at Mount Scopus campus. There are people still asking about it. Mount Scopus campus of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in the humanities department. I'm also going to I just put the link back in the chat room, repost the link so that you all can see the online information. And there has been a question recurring, Professor, regarding a printed version of a catalog. Is there such a thing?
If you go to our website where it says catalog, there is instructions about how you can order it. We do send it out. It costs 150 shekels. There is a link that you can go into and you can order it, and we send them out. We have about 100 still in my office, so anybody who wants to buy one, I think we have enough to be able to send them to you if you're interested.
Thank you. There's also many questions about if it's going to come to the United States at some point.
So a few people said, wouldn't this be nice if it came to the United States? But the truth is that no one from the US has reached out, as opposed to places in Europe where people have already written to me and they want to know what they need to do to bring the exhibit there. If any of you are in touch with the institution that would be interested, I'd be thrilled to hear from you. And my email's on the website, so there's no problem to find me and to write to me and to reach me.
Thank you very, very much. There's also many, many compliments in the chat. I will send you the transcript so you can read them yourself. And now to questions. I must apologize to those I'm going to skip over as our time is short. Ahuva asked about the interaction between Sephardi, Mizrahi, and Polish Jewish communities in this time period.
Okay, so I think we have to distinguish between a few different things. Jews traveled all over the place. I think in general, medieval people were much more mobile than we think they were. There were Sephardim who came to Ashkenaz. We saw that just by looking at the Zmirot. How did the Sephardi Zmirot, written by Sephardim, Kiesh Mira Shabbat, and Dror Yekrat was written by Dunash ben Labrat, get to Ashkenaz? Because these people traveled, business people traveled. So we have people traveling all the time. And if you think back to that tax list from London, which I won't show you again now, but we had people there from Paris, we had someone there from London, we had someone there from Tillières, we have people there from all kinds of other places. So people are traveling. And often people are known by the names of the places they come from. So we do have Sephardim in Ashkenaz, we do have Ashkenazim in Sfarad. I think one of the questions that has not yet been asked enough is what was daily life like in Spain as well. So we have a lot of work to do on both sides of this Sephardic Ashkenazi divide, and to see what is similar and what is different in these places. We also have people from North Africa coming to Europe and people from Europe going to North Africa. What we know how to say about Poland during this period is a little bit more complicated. We know there are Jews in Poland during this period. We have records from Krakow, we have records from other places. We have Sheilot and Chuvot, we have questions sent to rabbis in Western Europe, in Ashkenaz, from Poland during this period. And we know that as Jews are expelled, and I didn't talk about the expulsion so much tonight, but the Jews are expelled from England in 1290. They're expelled from France in 1306 for the first time, finally in 1394. They're expelled from different places in Germany after, during the period of the Black Death. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. These Jews, many of them moved to northern Italy and also to Poland. So the Ashkenazi Jews we know from Poland in our modern life are often Jews who originally come from Germany, northern France, etc., and they move on to Poland. I have to say one more word about Provence. We also have Jews in Provence during this period, and a lot of Jews from northern France, when they're expelled, move to Provence. We have a lot of movement between all these different areas where Jews lived. And perhaps to give a good example of how Jews felt at home in the cities they lived in. They did not feel like strangers often. We can see how much local pride they had. And we hear the French Jews complaining about the Germans and the Germans complaining about the French Jews. And each of them very much identifies with the places where they live. So we can see how local they were and at the same time, how mobile they were between places.
Thank you very much. I kind of feel compelled to read one compliment. I apologize, Professor. But Alice, a wonderful patron of ours, wrote, the project is outstanding. I'll be in Germany next year for the exhibit. Thank you, Professor Baumgarten, for sharing your work with such passion. Teachers like you are a blessing for their students. So thank you very much, Alice. A question by Mika is there an edited volume forthcoming for undergraduates?
So we have a number of things we've produced. I'm happy to be proud of them here on this screen and to tell you all about them. I'm very, very proud of my students. I hope you've noticed that, right? And their work and all the wonderful things they do and all the wonderful methods they know how to use that I'm just learning from them. So we have produced, first of all, a teaching website for Israeli teachers for middle schools. Here in Israel, they study the Middle Ages in middle school. So if you go to our website, you can find a teaching website as well. Everything's on our website. We produced a volume of articles in Hebrew that came out 2 years ago in 2019, a volume of Chidushim. Coming out this summer, we have a double volume of the Jewish Studies Quarterly, in which we wrote articles about space. In other words, we took the space component of our work, and every member of the team wrote an article about space. In addition, the project has produced a number of monographs, one about masculinity in medieval Ashkenaz, one about well poisoning in medieval Ashkenaz, one about the seals that we talked about. So different members of our team have produced volumes of their own work, their doctoral dissertations that were published. We have a few more in the works that will be forthcoming. My own book about how you can learn about everyday life from biblical commentaries in the medieval period that's forthcoming with the University of Pennsylvania Press in the fall. We have produced, but it's not yet quite in production, this source book. It's been accepted for publication, but it's still going through the process of being edited. So I think that will probably take about another 1.5 years until it's ready. And as we speak, we are working on our final volume because projects do come to an end and we have 1 more year now that will try to be a summary or a presentation of the work we've done together that people can learn from about Jewish daily life in medieval Ashkenaz and what it means to go beyond the elite and find out about those people who usually are not written about because they didn't do the talking.
Thank you very much. Nancy requested any way to post a link to the musical performance of Dror Yikra that you mentioned?
So if you go into our catalog, on the page that describes Dror Yikra, you can press on the link and you get straight to the recording. Everything is really set up so that you can get from any page to any page. So there are QR codes in each place, there are links in each place. You just need to scan them and you get straight to it. If you go into the virtual exhibit and you don't get nervous, like I was getting nervous because I was presenting to you, you probably can play with that button a little bit longer and you'll manage to press on it, what I didn't manage to do just now for you. So you can also do that and hear the Dror Yikra. The group is called Alla Francesca and they play Dror Yikra. So if you just wrote Alla Francesca in Google and Dror Yikra, I think you would get there right away. The clip is on YouTube and it's available for everyone.
Thank you very much. Sandy wrote, regarding heaven and hell, was there any intermarriage, any evidence of intermarriage in medieval times?
So I think you have to just phrase the question a little bit differently. Jewish men and Christian women, Jewish women and Christian men certainly had sexual relations with each other. Some of them certainly had long-lasting relationships and perhaps even had children together. However, in the medieval world, this would not be called marriage. Marriage was between two people of the same faith. So we have Jewish marriage and we have Christian marriage. One of my wonderful colleagues, Professor Ruth Karras, who teaches at the Trinity University in Dublin, she wrote a book that she called Unmarriages. You can look for it. It's a wonderful book by Ruth Mazo Karras called Unmarriages. And in this book, she explains what that means. I'm writing it in the chat just now, and I'll write her name for any of you who are interested. And she talks about that. So what I'm saying is that certainly there were relationships between Jewish men, Christian women, Jewish women, Christian men, etc., but they just would not have been called marriages.
Thank you very much. So Mika asked, did any of you come across evidence of enslaved people in Jewish households in Ashkenaz?
Okay, so Albert Cohn, who I spoke about, is very interested in homes and what went on in the homes. And one of the things he would like to look at more closely is the status of servants and of slaves. We have both. I would actually say that we have many more slaves in the early modern period than we have in the the high Middle Ages. The early modern period, as we all know from American history, North and South American history, is a period of enslavement and of slaves. And we know that from the slave trade that went on as part of the discovery of the New World. But in the medieval period, we also have slaves. We have indentured servants. We have different kinds of connections. One of the things that have to be studied more carefully is what are the status of those people who work in Jewish homes. 2 years ago, I organized a conference at the University of Toronto about servants. Servants are really fascinating. Almost every Jewish home had Christian servants. These Christians lived within the home, they cooked within the home, they ate within the home, they learned Jewish customs, they brought Christian customs into the Jewish home. Think of how much contact, how much entanglement there was just by having that within the household. And urban economies needed people in the house to work, just to draw water from the well, to do the laundry. All these things took a lot of people power. So we definitely have servants and we have people who are slaves, but more work needs to be done on this. And this is really a topic that's being studied very widely, not just by scholars interested in medieval Judaism, but also by scholars interested in medieval Christianity and medieval Islam and the role that minorities played in Christian culture. I guess I could say come back in a few years, maybe I'll have a better answer.
Thank you very much. Nancy asked if you have spoken in other events for the National Library of Israel, and I've got to say no, but we may still repair that.
I have not spoken on the Zoom events, Doron, but I have, the National Library has been my home since I was an undergraduate in the 90s. So I have had the opportunities to speak a number of times at the library.
Absolutely. We've had a relationship for 5 years at least since I've been there. And I was just mentioning this because we have recorded events of past events in our website, but you're not there, but hopefully there will be more to come. So Phyllis, Micah asked, does the Mazel Tov ring depict a synagogue or the temple?
So that's a good question. What it depicts a building. The building looks like a local building, often like a church or like not a church, but like a beautiful building, a synagogue, or maybe a temple. And that really is something that scholars have tried to understand what it depicts. It depicts a building, and that's very beautiful. I'm sorry that Dr. Idonoy is not here because he can answer that question better than I can about why he thinks people chose to depict things in this way, maybe a heavenly Jerusalem or other such things. I will tell you that at the Jewish Museum in Erfurt, and you can go to their website and have a look afterwards, they actually reproduce the Mazal Tov ring today, and you can buy it if you want for someone and actually wear a ring like that. So we can see that. They also found a ring like that in Colmar and in other places. So we have a number of examples of them. They're not all quite the same. Some have longer houses and some have kind of more round houses. We produce both typical kinds that we have for the exhibit. So you could have an idea of what they actually looked at. One says Mazal on one side and Tov on the other side. And one has the letters Mazal Tov kind of around the spires of the tower in the middle.
Thank you so very much, Professor. I will open microphones for everyone. Wonderful to see such a wide variety of countries represented here. Thank you all for coming and being here. We'd be happy to see you in our next events. Thank you once more, Professor. And Laila Tov from Jerusalem.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the National Library for hosting me. Thank you very, very much.
תודה רבה. היה נפלא.
תודה רבה.
Magnificent. Just thank you so much. Thank you so much.
להתראות.
בסדר גמור.
Thank you.
תודה. בסדר גמור. תודה רבה.
This is Phyllis in Madison, Wisconsin. It looked like the artists, several of them used micrography, which is a Jewish art form, and I wondered how conscious or deliberate that was.
So most of the micrography you saw was all in Kalman's work. It was deliberate. In other words, it's a technique that he uses often. One of the really interesting things that happened is that one of my students who saw, I'll backtrack a second. One of the really nice things that happened on campus this spring was that the exhibit went up over the course of a few weeks. And sometimes I would walk by the exhibit and I'd hear the students saying, what's happening in the exhibit today? You know, what's going up today? It was very exciting to watch it kind of coming together. And one of my students got very upset with me. And he said to me, Elisheva, that's not how medieval Jews wrote. That's not the way they wrote things. Why are you using script like that in that way? And I said to him, it's not supposed to be medieval. It's supposed to be modern. It's supposed to be what a modern Israeli, American-born artist tries to depict when he's doing it. So he's trying to use a lot of different techniques. And that's why I use the micrography in that way. But you can also see that he did it very, very interestingly, that he really tried to create the shapes and the stories that he was telling, not just with words, but also with other elements. So he really combines between techniques. If you go to the participants in the exhibit and you click on his website, you can see some of his other work, which is really beautiful. So he does a lot of really interesting things with these different techniques. So I recommend going to visit Kalman's website as well. I've become a huge fan over the course of our work together.
Professor, I got here late. Are you sending us a link to this to see it over again?
Doron has sent a link. We can send it again. I have to find it.
Okay.
Doron, maybe if you're still with us, you could send it one more time.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I've posted it several times in the chat. I'll do it again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you all very much. Are there any other comments
you.
before we say goodnight?
Thank you all once more.
Thank
Laila
you.
Tov, Jerusalem.
Laila Tov.